Hello and welcome to another episode of Sushi and the Swordfish. You're here with Sushi again, and today we're going to be looking at the May 2021 films that I watched. As you can see, there's a pretty decent chunk of movies we got through in May. Maybe not as long as the last 2 months, however, still a pretty good bunch here. So we're going to jump right into this. I've already explained kind of what our tier list looks like. I keep messing around with the colors on the bottom too. I don't know why. It's just, I guess, something to do. But they're all the titles remain the same regardless. And we're going to jump right in. So first we have Airplane. Again, another classic comedy movie from the 70s. Really funny. There's a lot of great lines in this. I think probably the most well-known line comes from Leslie Nielsen, and that's and don't call me Shirley. I'm misquoting it, unfortunately. Sorry about that. But that's a line that kind of pops up on a lot of comedy lists for one of the funniest lines. I think it's just because he's so deadpan about everything. And that kind of comes up again in the Naked Gun movies where people will say stuff to him and he's so deadpan in his response and he barely makes emotion. There's a few times when he does, but when he does, it's also appropriate. So in this movie, I think my favorite scene is actually the disco dancing scene where after he throws the lady into the air, she comes from like the side back into him and he catches it. It's hard to explain. You have to see it. It's just so stupid and silly that it makes me laugh pretty much every time. So I'm going to put Airplane in the big money, big prizes, and I love it. And there's some fun little cameos such as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the kid saying, "Aren't you Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?" No, I'm not. And it's pretty funny. Alice in Wonderland, probably one of the most well-known Disney movies. I'm throwing it right in the OK USA pile here. As it says, it's okay. I don't love the movie, but I don't hate it. I think it's worth at least one watch, but it's a kind of movie that I haven't seen in years. And after watching it just one time was enough for me to wait for a few more years to go back to it. Not because there's anything wrong with it, more so it's kind of stretched out longer than I remember. There's parts of it where, okay, you remember the White Rabbit and chasing White Rabbit, and you remember all the cards and the Queen of Hearts, and you remember these characters, but the scenarios that they're in are so bizarre and to me almost really forgettable. But the characters themselves have just like really iconic looks to them, and the Queen shouting and off with their heads is very iconic from this film. But so many aspects are unfortunately kind of forgettable, such as the flying buttered toast butterfly things, and uh, I didn't even remember the what is he use like the caterpillar smoking the whole time, and so it's okay. Okay, American Graffiti. I have to put this in the stink category. It's a dull movie. There's some really good actors in this movie. However, I couldn't. I got through the whole movie, but it's not a movie I'm going to coming back to. The cars are gorgeous. But it's just like basically driving around in a car for an hour and a half or whatever it is. Not very interesting for me. It's just really not. Um, it might be for somebody, but it's not for me. There was one scene though that made me laugh a little bit, and it's because The Simpsons actually stole it and parodied it, and it's when, if I recall, I believe it's Richard Dreyfuss goes to a store and starts picking out a whole bunch of items he wants to buy, but he's underage. And so he starts asking for alcohol, and then when he asks him for ID, he says something about like having to go to his car or whatever. But it's just the way he's picking everything out on the wall. And in The Simpsons, there was a gag about this where Homer goes to the convenience store when they're on, I think it's 4th of July. I won't mention all of the things he starts mentioning, but I'll take one of those and one of those, and then it's like two disposable, or he's like one disposable enema, make it two. And then he kind of slips in that he wants illegal fireworks. This is the same thing that happened in the film where The character saying, "I want this, I want this, I want this," some whiskey, and then he kind of tries to cover up that, and just hoping that the guy will put it in and forget that he's ordered it, kind of thing. Yeah, that part makes me laugh, but other than this, it's not a movie I would recommend necessarily. Breakfast at Tiffany's, even though it just says Tiffany's. Uh, Again, very interesting movie. It's Audrey Hepburn is very iconic in this movie. She's considered one of Hollywood's most iconic female actresses for a reason. And this movie is very weird, actually. She is from sort of an Amish family, but she ran away from her husband and is now living as a New York socialite. And just aspects of this movie are so bizarre to me. Aside from the style, which is again very iconic, I think it's worth watching at least once. But just the shopping at Tiffany's piece that finally comes up, which comes from the namesake of the film, and how she basically stands outside Tiffany's and eats I think it's a croissant or a bagel every day with a coffee or whatever it is. It's just it's weird. It's a weird movie when you really break down what's going on, and her having like socialite parties in her place and the guy that's following around, and I just thought it was weird. But again, the style and the iconography of her in this movie is unquestionable. I do not like Cars. I don't know what else to say. I don't like this movie. I don't like the characters. I don't like the setting. I don't have interest in NASCAR. This movie is 100% not for me. I don't know. They've made 3 of these, so obviously they've been successful. I could not get into this at all. I don't have an interest in building cars or anything either, so that probably doesn't help. There was nothing about this movie that got me interested. I am not interested in seeing planes either. It's just, but obviously they've been able to make some really large sums of cash to continue this franchise. I mean, other Pixar movies have been lucky to get sequels of 1 out of the first movie, and this is up to 3. So I won't be surprised when they make a 4th at some point, because they probably will. But I just do not like this franchise. At least this first movie. Maybe I could come around on the second or third. Because I don't like this first one this much, I don't think I even want to bother with the second or third. Okay, Copland. This is a really cool movie. This was acted really well, as you can kind of see from the little thumbnail. Harvey Keitel, Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, who's always plays somebody unhinged, but in this he plays a little bit. He's unhinged, but he's not necessarily a bad guy unhinged. And Sylvester Stallone does a really good job in this movie. It's funny how I remember hearing people say, "Oh, he deserves all this acting credit and this and that" when this movie came out. However, obviously, if you see the first Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, has a lot of really good acting skills, and he's also quite a strong director as well, or at least he can be. He's shown at times he can be when it presents itself. It just depends on what you're looking for in a movie. He really understands what a Hollywood film can look like, and he generally makes fun movies like Rocky, Rambo. These are kind of just fun movies, but when he does get into a very dramatic role, he can be amazing, and he's really good in this. Groundhog Day. Yeah, this movie's okay. Like, I know a lot of people really love this movie. I thought it was okay. You hear a lot of stories about there was some disagreements on set with what was happening with Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, which is unfortunate because they were quite close from my understanding before this. But they had some disagreements. I think it actually kind of shows in the final product. It feels like Bill Murray's interested but not interested half the time. I don't know. The plot is interesting enough, just reliving those days over and over again until you can kind of break that cycle. And he kind of cheats as he's doing this because he learns more and more about, I think this is Annie McDowell, I believe, and he's kind of able to utilize his information and those skills to eventually win her over. but like just it's interesting to watch for sure. It's people say it's a comedy, but it's like almost like borderline drama in a way too, but it's much more leaning into comedy. Okay, Killzone. Killzone is, again, this is okay. I didn't like it as much as Flashpoint. I thought Flashpoint was stronger in its presentation and the martial arts, but Killzone does have a really, really, really cool fight scene in, I guess, sort of an alleyway. I can't remember the other actor's name who's got the knife, and Donnie Yen's got the extendable baton, but they sort of did that fight on the fly. Like they did plan most of it, but there were parts of it that were both of them had got injured and stuff. It's a really brutal fight scene. It's really cool. And then the fight with Sammo Hung is quite good too at the end. Without spoiling anything, that ending is, without saying too much, depressing. I don't know what else to say. But again, I think Flashpoint's a little bit stronger film on the whole. All right, next we have License to Kill. I'm going to put License to Kill in the OK USA. I feel, unfortunately, that the Dalton Bond movies, they're totally serviceable. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're also nothing that stands out about them for some reason. I don't want to say forgettable, but they don't have some kind of edge piece to them for a lot of fans of the Bond movies. But this franchise really took a turn when Dalton took over as Bond, and it became far more gritty and serious after the Roger Moore era, where, and not necessarily the fault of Roger Moore, but just a combination of things. I think his acting style and prowess combined with the 1970s sensibilities and attitudes, combined with once they had kind of gotten to that point of being overboard with some of the comedy humor and goofiness, they didn't feel they could probably pull it back with that actor. Like, it was already at that point. So this really took it back to being much more serious. And then with Brosnan, it kind of almost blends the both of like a Roger Moore style with a Dalton style. But this falls closer in line to the Daniel Craig era, of being quite serious for the most part. There's, again, some like kind of totally cheesy jokes and things, but as a whole, pretty serious, which is really, as I said, it's unfortunate that it's a little bit forgettable, because there's really cool action sequences and so forth in them, but something about Dalton's Bond just feels a little bit different than the others, whether it's likable or not. I'd find that they're very competently made films, and I don't know, it would have been interesting to see another, maybe one or two Dalton movies, just to see what else he might have been able to bring to the character. Next we have Pale Rider. I'm just going to put OK USA. Again, not too much I can say here. It's a little bit by the numbers in a lot of ways, but there's aspects of it that are interesting, just from the gold mining and stuff like that. I don't have a ton of things I can really say about this movie. I think it's okay. It's directed pretty well. It's got some beautiful scenery. If you're looking for a Clint Eastwood Western movie, it might not quite be at the top of the list, but you can't really go wrong either. Next we have Safe. Safe surprised me. I didn't know too much about this movie. I was looking for a Statham film, and Statham's got quite a few films under his belt now that do have similar vibes to them. But Safe had at least a premise that was a little bit different. He ends up having to protect this girl because she has remembered the entire code for a safe, and she kind of gets caught between some rival gangs and stuff, and he ends up having to protect her, essentially, and they end up having to kind of work together. And if you get all the kind of traditional Jason Statham's going to bust some people up, bust some skulls kind of thing, and that's always really fun, and it's actually flows quite well. Okay, next we have Scrooged. And Scrooged is a weird movie. Again, I could probably put it in OKUSC, or I could put it in Stink. I don't know where I'd want to put it. There's things about it where it seems to be commenting on that 80s excess of what people thought they needed to have in their life, and it's playing the Uncle Scrooge character, you know, or the Scrooge character here. Sorry, I think Uncle Scrooge from DuckTales. And there's some funny things in it, and it's kind of over the top, which makes it a little bit enjoyable. But again, there's like a part of me that makes me think, I don't know if Bill Murray's full energies were being attended to in this. Like, was he really putting in his best effort here? There's aspects of it where you feel like it, and then other parts where he has this huge speech near the end of, bless everyone for Christmas or whatever he says. But it just it feels a bit off. It doesn't quite feel as if the character has completely turned a leaf. Maybe I will put it in stink, but I still enjoyed it for some random reason. But it's not a particularly strong film. Yeah, The Frog and the Princess. The Princess and the Frog. Decent enough Disney movie. I think it's underrated. I know there's a lot of criticism for the Tiana character being stuck as a frog, and even though, because there was a lot of media about this is we're having a princess who's not just a pale skin or white skin or whatever. We're having a black princess. They really try to emphasize this, and I do understand the criticism that she ends up transforming for a large chunk of the film. But the movie's got really, I love the setting of being in New Orleans. I love the villain is really good. The other characters are pretty good for the most part. The Naveen character is kind of a little bit not my favorite, but I thought Tiana was, as a whole, like, she's a strong character. I like her backstory. I like the reason what she's doing her things for. She really wants to open that restaurant. I love that she's a chef. Like, and that her song Almost There, that sequence, the animation is really, really neat. I like that part a lot, actually, in the film. So I think it's worth a watch. Okay, the Raid 2. I'm putting the Raid 2 in the OK USA. It is the Raid dialed up to 11. The fights are even more intense, but the film is a lot longer. It's a lot more complicated. I think it kind of falls in that same realm of Police Story and Police Story 2 for me. It's still highly enjoyable. It's still very, very watchable. But I think the flow of the first movie, because it's so tight and everything just happens within one building, where in this there's a lot more characters being introduced, and it feels a little bit, I don't want to say sloppy, but it just feels a little too all over the map and a little bit more confusing. So I think the first movie is a little bit stronger. Okay, The Wild Bunch. I'm going to put this in OK USA. I don't have a lot to say about this movie. I think mentally I was going into this that this was going to be similar to The Magnificent Seven. And maybe there's some minor parallels, but not really. These guys are not exactly the nicest dudes necessarily in the movie. The final battle sequence is quite intense and pretty fun. But I don't know. I think it's okay. It's a pretty well beloved Western film, but for me, it was okay. Okay, The Incredibles. The Incredibles. I have a hard time with this one too. I think when I first saw The Incredibles, it was in this tier. It was in the top dog tier. And after watching it again, there are parts of it where you're like, wow, I can't believe not only has the animation held up so well, but the story of the family coming together, protecting their identities, that hint of this comic book Silver Age characters, kind of mimicking the Fantastic Four, particularly for most of the powers and so forth. But then a part of me thought, okay, I don't know if it's because we've seen so many superhero movies now that have kind of evolved things beyond what The Incredibles did, but you could kind of say, well, they're one of the first to do it in this fashion, and so you can look at it that way. And it's still a really fun movie. That opening part of the film is really, really cool. Like, everything's in black and white, and it's kind of showcasing what the lives are of the modern day, and then why the heroes kind of have to go into hiding or get shut down. So that's pretty neat. Kind of the comic book Civil War kind of took some of that aspect actually. So it's funny how comics influence this movie, but there's an aspect of this movie that's kind of also influenced back, which is neat. So, but I think I'm going to put it there. Okay, and then our last movie is True Legend. And oh gosh, I'm having a hard time placing True Legend. It is an interesting film. It's very much trying to follow some of the old style martial arts movies from China with kung fu battles and some of the mysticism and so forth. It's, I don't know how to explain it very well. There's some really neat parts of it, but you have to have a very specific taste in martial arts films, because even though there's speed to the fighting and so forth, and there's a few cameos that you or you know, characters in there you might be like, oh cool, that actor's in this or whatnot. I said I'm debatably willing to put it down to the stink, not because it's badly made, but more so I don't know outside of really people who enjoy martial arts movies a lot will enjoy this. I don't think the average moviegoer or person could watch this all the way through. So it's a very acquired taste type film. But again, lots of really great actors in it. And if you do enjoy some of those older, what is it like? I can't even remember some of those Circle the Shaolin Temple or whatnot. There's so many of those older movies. If you like those, you probably will like True Legend. But if you don't and you think those are super silly movies, then you will not like True Legend. All right, but we're going to wrap up there. Thank you for joining me for a look at our May 2021 movies that I went through and watched this year. I'm really enjoying going through these films. It's kind of fun to reflect upon them, and some of them are sticking in my mind a lot better than others. I think it's too bad we don't have any top dog tier for this month. I could almost put Copland in there now I'm thinking about it too. I think I'll leave it where it is. But it's a strong movie for sure. It was really strong. And then Incredibles, I'm kind of, like I could do it, but I don't think I will. I think I'm pretty satisfied where these films are sitting. So thank you for joining me, and look forward to seeing you for the June 2021 films. See you down that road.